Welcome to Echoes of War. In this video, we will be covering Operation Just Cause in 1989, right after the Cold War. Let's dive right into the operation. Thank you for watching.
In December 1989, the United States launched its largest military operation since the Vietnam War, deploying roughly 39,000 personnel into a dense tropical environment. This massive, multi-branch deployment had a primary target: General Manuel Noriega, Panama's authoritarian ruler. For years, Noriega had been a highly valued asset for U.S. intelligence, actively cooperating with Washington throughout the Cold War. Yet by 1989, he was ruling Panama by force and sitting under a federal criminal indictment by the United States government. When diplomatic channels and economic pressure proved completely ineffective, a physical military confrontation became inevitable. Militarily, this forced intervention served as the crucial testing ground that validated modern joint force doctrine. To truly understand how this massive operation succeeded, we have to look past the tactical execution and examine the specific geopolitical power vacuum that made it necessary. The baseline for modern U.S.-Panama relations was established in 1977 when President Jimmy Carter and Panamanian leader Omar Torrijos signed a landmark treaty. The agreement stipulated that the United States would transfer full control of the Panama Canal by 1999, provided Washington retained the right to defend the waterway's neutrality. Throughout the Cold War, this specific zone remained one of the most strategically valuable maritime choke points on the globe. Then, in 1981, Omar Torrijos died in a mysterious airplane crash. His sudden death instantly created a massive political void within the Panamanian government. Into this space stepped the Panamanian Defense Forces, or PDF, which quickly emerged as the dominant institutional power structure in the country. Manuel Noriega systematically used the PDF to consolidate absolute control over the nation, ruling entirely without an electoral mandate. Control of a critical global waterway had shifted from a stable government to a military dictator, setting the stage for the crisis that would erupt by the end of the decade. During his rise, Noriega managed a delicate balancing act. He provided valuable anti-communist intelligence to the United States, while simultaneously operating vast criminal enterprises. These illicit operations included laundering money and actively smuggling cocaine in coordination with Colombian cartels. Washington tolerated these activities throughout the 1980s, because American policymakers were highly focused on restricting Soviet and Cuban influence in Central America. By 1987 and 1988, that calculus shifted. Noriega's blatant criminality escalated to a point where it vastly outweighed his intelligence utility. In 1988, 2 U.S. federal grand juries took an unusual step, formally indicting the foreign head of state for racketeering and drug trafficking. Issuing federal criminal charges essentially trapped the United States. Traditional diplomatic off-ramps were now legally impossible, guaranteeing a much harder physical confrontation. That confrontation accelerated during the May 1989 elections. Opposition candidate Guillermo Endara won a decisive victory, prompting Noriega to simply annul the results. PDF security forces beat opposition leaders in the streets, an act of political violence broadcast directly to a global audience. This domestic instability created an immediate tactical problem. Roughly 35,000 Americans lived and worked within the Canal Zone. Panamanian forces initiated a systematic campaign of harassment against these civilians, establishing unauthorized checkpoints and increasing random gunfire incidents. The situation reached a breaking point on December 16th, when American military officers were stopped by Panamanian forces.
During the encounter, Marine Lieutenant Robert Paz was fatally shot, and a detained U.S. Navy officer was physically assaulted. Following the attack, President George H.W. Bush concluded that economic sanctions and diplomatic negotiations had failed entirely. The unprovoked murder of an American serviceman forced Washington to pivot instantly from a strategy of political containment to a massive operation of direct regime change. This matrix illustrates the administration's 4 explicit strategic objectives for the invasion: protect American citizens, defend the canal, restore the elected government, and capture Noriega. Achieving these goals required neutralizing a 16,000-strong Panamanian defense force before it could organize resistance or secure hostages. The military solution was a simultaneous, overwhelming strike on more than 24 key targets across the country, executed at 1 a.m.
Logistically, this required rapidly synchronizing 27,000 deploying troops with the 12,000 U.S. personnel already stationed in Panama. The airborne phase included a massive, low-altitude Ranger parachute assault directly onto Torrijos Airport to quickly secure the runway. Meanwhile, Navy SEALs and other special operations forces were inserted to neutralize Noriega's escape aircraft and secure strategic waterways. This ground assault was supported by advanced air power, notably marking the combat debut of the F-117 Nighthawk, deployed to psychologically isolate enemy positions. As forces pushed into Panama City, they encountered complex urban combat, facing heavily concentrated fighting in densely populated districts like El Chorrillo. The heaviest engagement centered directly on La Comandancia, the heavily fortified PDF headquarters. Within days, this highly synchronized application of Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine assets completely shattered the PDF's command and control, definitively proving the effectiveness of joint force operations. While the initial strikes dismantled his military, Noriega managed to evade capture, eventually seeking refuge inside the Vatican's diplomatic mission. U.S. forces surrounded the compound, initiating a tense standoff where they deployed continuous psychological operations to pressure the dictator into surrendering. On January 3, 1990, Noriega surrendered to American forces and was immediately flown to Miami to face federal trial. The operational toll reflected the overwhelming tactical advantage. The U.S. sustained approximately 23 killed in action, compared to roughly 300 Panamanian Defense Force fatalities. That highly asymmetric casualty ratio validated a newly emerging military doctrine, applying absolute air superiority and overwhelming force to prevent a protracted engagement. With the primary target in custody, the initial political objectives were met. Guillermo Endara was sworn in as president, and the PDF was permanently dissolved. Most importantly, the Panama Canal was secured, allowing commercial and military traffic to operate normally under democratic governance. The intervention still carries enduring controversies, particularly regarding disputed civilian casualty metrics and the international legal precedent of invading a sovereign nation to arrest its leader. But operationally, the complex precision planning and multi-branch coordination perfected in Panama became the direct blueprint for the Gulf War just a year later. Ultimately, Operation Just Cause closed the era of Cold War proxy conflicts in the Americas, cementing the rapid, technology-driven doctrine that continues to define the modern U.S. military.